Hello everyone, welcome back to another video in our tutorial series where we do testing with Spring Boot. In this video we are going to be talking about Mockito. So we're going to do a Mockito introduction, and before we get to that we have to do some changes to our existing code. As you may know, in our user service we have a statically created list of users that we are using to stream through them and do some fancy stuff. We're going to move that list to a helper class, and this helper class is going to act as our database for now, and later on when we do integration tests we are going to use an actual database or in-memory database, but for now we need to kind of fake it. So to do that I have created a new package called helper, and inside of this package I'm going to create a new class called something like user provider helper. And inside of this class, first we're going to make it final, and we are going to create a constructor, a private constructor, and we are going to take the user list from the user service and paste it in there. So if I take this out, delete this, put it here, I'm going to create a new method here, public static get users, and here we are static list user detail, and here we are going to just return a list of our users, so users. Now we can basically copy this, move to our user service, and just use it like that. So if I replace all of this and this, and then go back to our tests, think all of them should pass, at least I hope so. I haven't really looked into it because we did some faking last time, but yeah, so all of them pass, so everything works as expected. Perfect, so we did our change, and that's what we wanted to get out of the way. Okay, so the next step here is to create a new service called something like user info service, which will be acting as a service that provides some useful information about our users. And that's something that we are going to again store in a different DTO. We're going to name it something like user info DTO, and it will contain maybe a user address and a phone number or something like that. So let's create that. So let's go here, create our new DTO, call it user info DTO, and inside of this let's create two properties. So here we have two properties. We have our address and our phone number in this DTO. So quite simple, nothing complicated here. Maybe we don't even need this constructor, so let's get rid of it. And yeah, let's then go to the user provider helper method, and let's create something like a list of some user info. And how we're going to do that is public static list user info DTO get user info. And here maybe let's extend this and do something like private string user ID. So we're going to add the user ID here. One neat trick, you can add it as a constructor parameter quite easily with IntelliJ, and also generate getters and setters. So we have added the user ID here because we are going to need that also. So what do we do here? We create new array list with initial capacity 3 because we have 3 users, and let's name this user info. Let's make it a list of user info DTOs, make it final. And what we are going to do is we are going to iterate through users, and we are going to new user info DTO. So now we need to create, we have user ID, address, we can put A here, and phone number we can put 0043, and let's put something like int I equals 0 and append it to the number and to the address, just so that we can identify them. So plus I plus I, and let's go user info dot add. So we are adding it to the list that we have here, and then at the end we just return this list. Perfect. Now let's create one more method called get user. Actually, this one should be renamed to get user. So we're getting multiple users. Let's create one public static UserDTO get user. And to this method, we are going to be providing a string, which is the user ID. And what we are going to do now is we are going to go return users, and we are going to stream through it, filter, and we are going to filter x.getID equals user ID, and then find first, or else just return null if it doesn't match. And I think we can replace this with equals. And so the filter will return a stream consisting of elements of the stream that match the given predicate. So basically whoever matches this will be returned as in this new stream that comes out of here. And then we just take the first element of that stream because we only have one ID that should match. Okay, great. Now let's create our service. So this is the main part why we are here. So we go to the service package and we create new user service info, and we make it a service, and in it we create public user info DTO get user info, and we provided string user ID. Now what we want to do with this, we want to fetch our user info. How we do that? We can go to our user provider helper get user, because yeah, this is our user, and we go final, and now we want to check if user equals null, return null. Else, if it's if the user actually exists, we can go and fetch the user info. So user provider get user info. So we're getting infos, I guess, because we are getting a list. And then we do similar thing as we did with the user. So user infos.stream.filter, and we are now matching xget user ID equals this user ID, find first, or else null, and we just return this. So it's quite a bit of logic. I know that it's not what you would usually do. There are more efficient ways to do this, but keep in mind that we are trying to have a bit more complicated method here. So it looks like we are doing some stuff, but usually you would just go, instead of here, we would go directly to the database and check if it's null, and if not, so if the user exists, doesn't exist, maybe log some message here and stuff like that. But for now, we just do it like that. So now what we want to do is we want to go to the user service, and here we want to create a method that will return a list of infos for given users. For example, public list user info DTO get user infos, and it will take a final list user DTO users. Actually, we can even string user IDs. We can pass in the list of user IDs. And what we do now is we do some checks. For example, if is empty, user IDs. So if we didn't pass in any IDs, we just return an empty list, which is quite nice. Otherwise, now we want to go to our user service, and we don't, so user service info, we don't have it, so we have to inject it. Private user service info, add it to the constructor, auto-wire it so we can inject it, and here we can go user service info get user info, so you can get it by the ID. So let's do this a bit fancier. So return user IDs stream.map x. So this is a user ID. We can actually name it nicely, user ID. User service info get user info user ID dot collect to a list. So hopefully it's clear what we are doing here. We have our list of user IDs, which we are streaming through, then mapping the user service info, get user info, which is just getting the user info. And what we forgot is, wait, not here, we go back, filter, we want to get rid of those that are null. So this will return the ones that match, which is not null, so non-null. And we are collecting it to the list and just returning that list. So let's now test this. So this is where Mockito comes in. I know that it was a quite long way to get here, but it will be worth it, trust me. So how do we do this test? We have our user service here, which now expects something. It expects this user info. Basically, since this is a unit test and not an integration test, you want to mock this user info. You don't care about its functionality. You only want to test the functionality of the user service here. The user info, actually we named it quite wrong. It's user service info. Let's refactor it and rename it user info service. That's much better. And let's also rename this. And so user info service will be tested in its own unit test. We don't care about what it does. We just expect some results from it. But in the user service, we want to test our new method. So how do we do this? Let's go private user info service. And then we go here. User info service equals Mockito dot mock. And we provide in the class that we want to mock, which in our case is the user info service. And we put that here. Yeah, so now we are creating a mock of the user info service. Basically, every method that is there is mocked, meaning that if you would call now user info service get user info, it would call the mocked method, but the mocked method doesn't return anything, so we also have to mock the response of it and whatever. But for now, let's just leave it as it is and let's create some tests. So what we are trying to test, let me close all of this. So we are trying to test this get user infos method. If we go here and create a new test, public void test get user info, and let's create the one where it fails. So no user IDs. Basically, this one will be where we try to get the infos, but we don't pass in any IDs. So user service get user infos, we pass in null, and let's assert that the response is empty, because this, if the user infos are null, we're going to return an empty list. And same if we just pass in the new array list. And let's run it. Hopefully it works. Yep, it does work. Perfect. Now let's test something else. Let me just copy this. And let's do it like this. So now we want to create a list of user IDs. So actually we don't have to do that. We can just go like this. For example, UserService get all users, and we can create list.off, and we don't actually have to create that here. We can paste it here, and we can copy this out of here and just remove it. List off. So all users get one at index 1 and actually get ID and not there. So we are testing a couple of things here. So we are testing the one that should be returned and the one that should not be returned because we don't have a user with this ID. And this would be our user infos. We can make this final. And we can make this one final. Now, as you may have noticed, what should happen now? Our user service goes here, calls the user info service, which calls the get user info for some user ID, but this user ID is, so this user info service is mocked. So how do we get the response? What will be the response? It won't go to the real one. So it goes to the mock, and as I said, we are not returning any results. So we have to mock them here. What we can do is call Mockito dot do answer, and we have this answer here. Let's leave it as it is. When, so Mockito, please answer this when user info service, and then get user and any. Let me try to import it. So it's the argument matchers any, and more correct here would be any string, because the string. Yeah, now the answer contains a get arguments. You can get arguments from, you can get all of them, but you can get them from the certain index, and our index is 0 because we only have one argument passed into this method, and that argument is we know it's our user ID, and this is a string. So our user ID is a string, and now we can do some things, like for example, if user ID equals not there, what should you do? Just return null. For example, because we are here mocking that this user ID, so the user with this ID does not exist. But what if a user with a certain ID exists? So we can go then return, and we can actually use our user provider helper get user with user ID, because if it exists, it will just go here and return it. I mean, we could have done the same with this one. We could have passed it here and it would just return null, but I wanted to just to show you how you can do it differently. Okay, now let me just do a static import on Mockito, and since we have this now, we can go to our test and execute it, and we can do actually some assertions. So assert that user infos dot has size 1. So we'll just do that for this video because we are going to end it quite soon. So let me just run it, and it fails because okay, we have some issue somewhere. What do we do? Okay, yeah, we are returning here get user info, which is what's happening? We have something user IDs get user info, and probably it's in our mock somewhere. From where do we call it? We call it from here, user service test. Yep, we go here, we go here. Okay, I get it. So we made a mistake in the test here when we are mocking. We are using this to return the user, but we actually don't want that. We want the user info. So what we need to do is we need to create a new method, public static user info, get user info, and final string user ID. And we just want to get the user info based on the user ID. We can actually rename this one. Oops, not. Rename it to get user infos and rename this and put back this one. And then we can go something like get user infos dot stream dot filter. Again, the same thing. X.get user ID equals and user ID dot find first or else null, and we just return this. So this is just helping us find one of the users. Again, this will later we will fetch from the database, so we won't have it like this. And then we can go back to our service test and replace this in the mock. And now if you run the test again, it should pass hopefully this time. And yes, it passes. Yeah, that would be it for this video. I know it was a bit too much, but we needed to do some things before we can get introduced to Mockito, and in the later videos we're going to explore it more and see what else it can do. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment, and all of the code that you need, you can find it on GitHub. And yeah, so I will see you in the next one.